You're listening to the Who is Christine Anyway podcast season 2. Today's guest is musician, author, and actor Justin Pearson. Enjoy. Last night, Justin, I caught up on your documentary on Amazon now. And there was a lot of interesting facts and stories in that. That was awesome. Don't Fall in Love with Yourself is the name of that. And I was really kind of skeptical revisiting that with the title. And I'm like, okay, I really have to kind of pick it apart in my mind. A lot of your roots are based in DIY. I love DIY. I love Locust. Going back and through things, and especially with us having mutual friends and stuff, it's always interesting. Sort of like Retox, Mike Crane, all those guys. When you got that furry vest, it's in that black fur vest, I stopped the show and I looked at my kid and I was like, I think I saw that at Kohl's. It's back in. I can get it back out now, just so you know. That's completely safe.
Yeah. We found those uniforms at a thrift store in San Francisco randomly, and it was in context to like this publication called Hit It or Quit It that was just talking so much shit on us on the way the Locust dressed in our street clothes. And so we were like, oh, fuck them. Let's, there was 4. And we're like, let's buy those things at that thrift store and wear those, and like jokes on them. Like, they want to talk about our clothes, then they could definitely start talking about it. And then that morphed into uniforms because we got goggles and hot pants and shit.
Yeah, the welder's goggles. I'm like, man. And the hot pants. Did you maintain keeping those? Like, I'm sure you probably have them maybe tucked away safely.
I do. Yeah, I do have that stuff still. And it's funny because a lot of it was like, well, it was a backlash on like people talking shit about our street clothes, which we didn't even really care about. We're like, hey, we're musicians, we're playing music or whatever, we're artists, or can we talk about that instead of like our pants or whatever? And then, I think we kind of were also like on the fringes of the broader spectrum of punk and hardcore, which was also like very patriarchal and sort of macho, and especially in the hardcore realm. So we were trying to like use subversiveness and like infiltrate with this like almost like homoerotic, I don't know, just like fucking with like people's masculinity and it was wild. Yeah, it was wild. It's really weird to like get in a fight and break someone's nose when you're like wearing hot pants,
Yeah, I can't imagine someone swinging on me in a furry vest, but I would also be like, I kind of deserve that. Also, I'd probably be like, wait a minute, I couldn't fit in hot pants if I tried. Like, I was thinking, I'm like, I couldn't look that good. And in welder's goggles too, like, did you guys modify them to see better through them, or like, were you?
That was a learning curve.
The lights hitting them.
Yeah, it was. I think every uniform we had was a pain in the ass because it's like, yeah, let's play like super technical music and like have to be married to our pedal board at our feet and sing at the same time and just put some shit over our face. So yeah, it was very difficult.
There's a lot of fine motor skills. I'm watching you guys play, and I'm like, especially you play further up on the fretboard, and I'm watching, and I'm like, okay, you have to know exactly your pedal board to a T. And were you guys traveling with techs at all back then? I wouldn't think you would be having a tech, maybe one.
I mean, we had a sound engineer for the most part because we couldn't trust random people to be nice to us,
Yeah, the crowds look fun. I think I saw one guy jump from a balcony, and I think during that point in the documentary, I was like watching that person fall, which it's really funny. So congratulations on surviving, getting through that, and really making impact. And I love it. So my first venue, like I said, I don't know how deep of a dive you did on me. My first venue ever was a youth center. We had, I loved the way you described your introduction into music. And somebody told me, they asked me questions in reverse. They're like, how are you going to describe to Justin, his beginnings and in the sound? And I'm like, if somebody asked me to describe the sounds that I heard coming through that in terms of artistry and music, it's like, if we're going to add a visualization to it, I'm like the lines that follow Pigpen off of Charlie Brown, the way that they're all so chaotic, but yet so you know what it is. You know what it is without even being able to assign a value to it. So I'm like watching that, and I'm like, that is just masterful. And I don't know, like you call them uniforms. Would you call them, I don't even think they would be classified as a costume. It would almost be a full outfit, because that is something you would see technically walking on these mainstream runways now. But back then, what was considered like you said, thrift store finds.
Well, the first one was just like a fuck you to this publication, and then we kind of went to Japan, and people were like psyched, and Japan's also way more creative, than the rest of the planet. So we were like, oh shit, like let's lean into like uniforms, and then we started like actually getting uniforms made. But the reason I think part of it's jokingly because like costumes is so hokey, and like we were trying to like I mean, I think a good artist doesn't take themselves too seriously, but we also were not just trying to fuck around and like be stupid. So we were, we were like, these are your uniforms, and like half like tongue in cheek, I guess, like, we're serious. These are uniforms. Don't call them costumes or whatever, but we also like seeing
probably
like,
excited with that.
What's that?
You know how many fights you probably incited with your fans going to people going like, don't call this an ensemble. This is a fucking uniform.
I mean, I think the violence that followed the Locust was usually like way more. It was like way more focused on other things than like our attire and like people sticking up for us, because a lot of it did have. I don't know, like there was a lot of interesting stuff that happened to the band, but the uniform thing was just like our kind of objective to, because we were looking at like bands like Devo or even like later Beatles when they started, looking weird with mustaches and stuff. Like we were kind of psyched on like the symmetric like like allegiance of these people in a band. Like it looks cool, and so we kind of wanted to do that. And a lot of it was just like subconscious and kind of like by the seat of our pants. Literally, like we had the furry vest, and then on that tour, some other place we're like, hey, there's hot pants at that store. Let's get hot pants, I guess, and then like let's get goggles, and then and then eventually we were like, okay, we need uniforms, like we'll get them made, and then we were getting like robbed, or people would like fuck up our shit and like destroy our uniforms or whatever, and that was so it was just like we were just constantly trying to like evolve in the way we looked, because we wanted to separate ourselves from regular bands, especially like a lot of the bands we were touring with, and I mean, we did a tour kind of early on with this band, or this tour called Oops, which was like the Locust, Air Bomb Radar, and Lightning Bolt. And then like part of it had Erase Errata and Pink and Brown and a couple other bands. And everyone did have uniforms or like vibes or whatever. They all look like that band and that band, you're and like, this is our shit right here. And I think that was kind of cool. It made it seem like this weird, sci-fi universe of noise artist or something. So, I don't know. I mean, we were all like into, again, science fiction or like cool, weird, film.
I may have misseen it because it was very quick, and I'm like, but did I see a Mystery Science 3000 poster on the background during the documentary somewhere?
There was one in our house at one point. Yeah.
Okay, so I did catch that. I'm like, oh, Mystery Science Theater. I'm like, no, cool. I didn't expect that, and when I pointed that out, like the room just kind of looked at me. I'm like, you guys haven't seen that?
Speech is a brilliant show. So, yeah.
It's a great show. Like, it needs to come back.
Yeah.
So it's, if somebody was to come into your house right now and just be like, all right, you got to put one piece of your uniform on that is the least comfortable, what would it be?
I mean, none of it was really uncomfortable necessarily. I think there were certain things that were like a drag, I guess. The heat, obviously, because some versions. There was a later version that was blue that had like fur stuff on it, and the fur stuff was not breathable. So we started realizing that like certain fabrics weren't really helping out. But I guess the least comfortable would be like putting a mask over your face and it's like smashing into your eyelashes or whatever, and that's.
It was like almost like straight covering your nose too. So breathe.
Yeah. It was difficult when you had to spit or blow your nose or something, especially, the way we would perform. I had a game of barfing. He'd always lift his mask up and puke and then put it back on. So
I think if he didn't take it off, it would have like strained it though. Like, spaghetti through a colander, and that would have just been like next level. Yeah. Like at one point I'm watching him throw out the van window. Like somebody's throwing out the van window. I remember that. And I'm thinking, I'm like, man, that he's lucky the wind's going that direction. And I'm thinking, I'm like, who washes the outside of that van after? It's gonna have like the worst day.
Oh yeah.
They're out there just Windexing, vomit.
The vomit, yeah. We were also on tour once and we were really, really late somewhere and it was like freezing outside and Gabe peed out the window and it froze along the side of the van, which is crazy because I didn't know that urine could freeze. So,
Well, it's water.
yeah, I thought it would be like alcohol or, like how you can't freeze like alcohol. I don't know.
You shouldn't. Yeah. It's like a bad science experiment.
It was just like, and I was like, oh, that's gross. That's really gross.
I don't even want to know how cold it was there because it gets really cold here. It's like -16 this morning here. Like I owed the Fahrenheit. I don't know how that happened, but there's -16. So now I kind of just want to go find some pee and throw it in the wind and see if it turns to snow before it hits the ground. Huh? Look, we did this. It's all science. It's just bodily fluids. We're seeing what freezes before it hits the fucking ground. That's all. This is just purely banned research. So the first venue I had was a youth center. I had a piss poor childhood, not as, dark as yours, but it was pretty bad. I was raised by my grandparents. Not the best likelihood for parents. My parents preferred, drugs over their children. And my grandmother was like this staunch Catholic woman. She's now 86 and she's gotten to the point where she's got the fuckets and it's the best. Like, I'm like, hey, guess what I did? She's like, good for you. I would have did it too. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm not even able to disappoint you anymore. So then my father was like, I want you guys back, move back in. And I end up down at this youth center after this really contentious fight with my father. And I'm down in this back lot and I can hear music and it's very chaotic and it's very intense. And it's almost like a controlled burn of angst. And I walk in there and I kind of peek my head around and I don't look the part at the time, and they just kind of suck me in. Like, it was just literally like a come, and they just yank me in. Didn't even make me pay the $5 cover charge, which I still feel kind of bad about. And then I got in there and it was like this really weird moment where it's an old meat locker. So there was like I-beams where they would hang carcasses and all kinds of stuff. And the windows had chicken wire in the glass and it was barred up. I'm like, this wouldn't pass code now, but it was one of the dopest venues. The stairs to load in, insane. Like the bands that played for me were like, they still message me and they're like, my back still fucking hurts. And just like, it's been 20 years, friend. Like, time to let it go. But it was still one of like the best venues. And it was the woman who ran it at the time, what was it called? The director. She was just a hippie, total hippie. And kids would like switch out her tea and put in like laxative tea. Like they would just straight fuck with her. And she was just like, use anything in my office. So that's what I kind of got into. I was using byofl.org. You have got to be the only other musician that maybe knows what that was back then.
I don't know. Wait, BYOFL?
Yep. Book your own fucking life. Yeah. Okay. Good. Finally, somebody who fucking knows what I'm talking about.
Well, the book. I mean, there was the publication, Book Your Own Fucking Life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I got onto the message boards and I started doing like show swaps. And then I was like, okay, well, cool. I'm doing my DIY show swaps. And then I was like, I'm going to swap a show for an article. And I learned how to like deal in cards.
Yeah.
And it was very DIY. And I would like print off, I'm like Halloween show. And I'd print off, oh, look, it's a picture of a pumpkin. And then I'd go on like Microsoft Word, type up their names in like a different fucking font. I was 14, okay? 15, 16 into that point. And then when I was like turning that corner at 16, of course, like I've cut all my hair off. I've dyed it black. In fact, I know you were mentioning you always hear about the Jerry Springer show. It was really funny because I had actually went back and watched that clip for the first time in forever, probably about a week ago. And the person next to me goes, you look like the chick with the dark hair at that time. And I'm like, oh my God. And I do. If you look up the photos, I actually had I had a little faux hawk, I had spaghetti hair, I had the bangs in the front. I'm like, okay. And it ends up the Jerry Springer thing, dude. Your Jerry Springer is my TRL. I ended up in the TRL audience in the early 2000s. So, like, I always hear about that bullshit, like the same way you do there. But, there's so much that's gone on in your tenure in music. And a lot of it aligning. And I think, that I'm like, I know exactly that moment he's talking about when he's like, I want to do something different. I want avant-garde. And then at the end of the documentary, when, you know, I can't remember who it was had asked you, you know, do you see yourself doing anything else in your life? And like, he said you looked at him with a blank stare. And I'm like, I know exactly what he's talking about. I'm like, I don't think I've ever thought about that. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't foresee myself ever stepping out of the role. I've done, you know, music venues. Everything's been, you know, brands, bands, everything. I could have signed with these big companies. I didn't want to do that. It didn't seem interesting. It doesn't seem fun to be glued to a fucking desk and being told what to book. It doesn't seem fun being told how to market or what to write or how to write or what's acceptable or who I can and can't work with. And that kind of is interesting to me about like your career too. And I mean, like I could go down, you have such an amazing repertoire of bands you've been in and such a unique style of playing. And you know, you've got 3 books out. I haven't read your last one. I know. Very bad. How's your dog?
My dog just had his 9th birthday. No, he's not there. Yeah, he's cool. He just turned 9. He's brilliant. Yeah, the book stuff's weird too. You know, it's a lot of it's just like putting out a record in a lot of ways for me, I suppose. Yeah, I pissed more people off with books than I do with records, which is odd.
You do book burnings, not record burnings. I mean, maybe there's a correlation. It's kind of weird though, because when I found out that you were an author, like when your book came into my house, and I was like, huh. And then I kind of like, this is like 10 years ago. And I'm like kind of doing the math. And I'm like, there's somebody else in music who's done books. Like, this is weird. I've kept journals my entire, you know, career, life, whatever. But I started writing for publications at 16 because I was like I told you, I'll trade you this for that. And I'm like, well, I'm going to do this. And I would start writing. And I just started writing again for another local publication and did like small market success and how these people can work. There's a DIY promoter down here who, you know, he's been hopping between these small buildings. He only wants to do DIY. I love him for it. And there's just so much to be done in these books. Were they like premeditated books, or was it just you sat down with a keyboard and it came out? Or was it like journals you had kept that you kind of like transcribed over?
I have no journaling ever. I keep it all in my brain. So I did a tour diary for some publication a long time ago, and I had shared it with John Waters, and he was like, "Oh, this is great. You should write a book." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know what what is, sure, whatever."
Why the fuck would anybody want to know that? Like,
I mean, it's weird how he just like kind of was like, "You should write a book." And I thought he was just being nice, you know. And he's like, "No, you should do it." And I was like, "Well, I don't know how." He's like, "Just write a story, write a short story." And so I was like, "Huh." And so I just I was on tour, and this is like, you know, I had lots of free time in the long drives, and so I wrote this story about when I was a kid, about like how I thought I was going to see Kiss when I was 5, and it didn't happen. And so I kind of just wrote this little story, and I was like, "Hey, check this out." And he's like, "There it is. That's the start of your book." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Just write more." And so I just looked at it like kind of like if you were to write an album, like each little chunk or story was like, I just was like writing different, like, oh, this happened, this had, this, and then I put them all in a chronological order, and it made it seem like a thing. So that was my first book, which is called From the Graveyard of the Arousal Industry, and I was lucky to like get it on a real, you know, like have a real publisher put it out, and I was assigned an editor, and I learned a lot working with an editor, and they were really, really great and helpful, and told me about like how they want to make sure I keep my voice and stuff. And I was like learning just basic things that I think maybe I would have not have thought about. And then so when I wrote my second book, it was very specific, like to me working with and like with DJs, like doing EDM stuff. And it was like, I learned to not say like, "Man, you guys are fucking stupid," you know, or "You guys suck," or whatever. It was more like, "I'm fucking stupid. Look what I did with these people." You know, I don't want to call them assholes, but like, look what I did. I was really fucking dumb. And I linked up with the
over to assholes in school.
Whatever. No, I mean, like, I don't want to be a dick about it, because like, joke's on me, because I was the stupid motherfucker that went on tour with these people or like collaborated. So like, I kind of looked at it like just making fun of myself is like a way more effective and maybe like
self-depreciation for some fucking reason sells in this really odd way. Like, I hate that job. You know, it's wild because people ask me all the time too. They're like, can I read your journal? Can I, well, what do you think about this? And I'm like, you don't want to read those thoughts. Trust me, you don't want to read that. That's like, it's like self-flagellation almost. And in a way, it's almost just as vulnerable as a record, if not more vulnerable, especially with writing. And with an editor, you're giving it to them and then asking them to give it back in a different light and editing. And like, you really don't want to lose your voice when you're writing as a whole. Like,
well, I think a good editor will say like, hey, this doesn't make sense, or, little like things, or like, can you clarify this? Because in your brain, you're like, I know this story, but to someone who maybe doesn't know, because the book that I just released actually last week, Gigi, Alien, and the Mystery Meat, that was crazy because I sent it to my editor and he was like, is this fucking real? Like, is this all real? And I was like, yeah. And then, so that was like a sign that maybe it was a decent book, I guess. But my concern with that was really interesting because it kind of deals a lot with like LGBTQ plus, and like I didn't want to overstep or as like I don't identify as like queer or gay, but I didn't want to overstep and offend people, and especially now like with like the Karens of the left. If you like fuck up once, like you're done, and so I was really concerned because there's a lot of language in the book that are like that's like alarming, like the real F word, like the real like the 3-letter F word, like, and I'm like, hey, I want to make sure this doesn't like cross the lines of what I can and can't do, and so like having an editor kind of look at it and be objective was very helpful because I was concerned for once.
But that makes sense though, and it's kind of weird because you obviously you're male, I'm female, so when we go into it, it's the same thing. People are like, well, I don't want to offend you. So I speak like, because I'm like, no, it's actually more offensive, I find, when people like pussyfoot around shit towards me.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my mind. And it's the same thing. Like, it's, the LGBTQIA plus community, all the political factions, all these other things. Everybody is so easily offended. And that was, when people walk into venues, that's where everything is supposed to drop. To a degree. Like, you are all in the same crowd for the same moment, for the same purpose, for the same reason. And for some reason, a lot of these things have permeated into. Now, the only statement that should be political or one way or the other is, the musician's performance. And it is exactly that. It is art. It is a performance. I don't walk in and point to a painting and go, yeah, fuck that guy. Like, it's kind of one of those things. But I never pointed at Picasso's shit and said, let's cancel him, and made a point in the nose.
Well, I agree in part with what you're saying, but I also feel like there's a certain kind of like moral standard, a moral high ground, like if you have, I mean, also too, like, even like people that are like a generation a bit older than me, like they kind of grew up where like, even referencing Gigi Allen in my new book, like that guy was fucked, he said like the F word, the N word, he fucking beat up whoever, he shit on him, people, like he did whatever, like, and so like that, I feel like when I grew up, I caught the tail end of that, and I was like, oh, you can kind of get away with stuff. Or like I grew up in the 90s, so I'd go to shows and there was always neo-Nazis, Now if a neo-Nazi showed up in the show, people would lose their fucking minds, Like a straight up like person wearing a swastika on her shirt wouldn't pan out well for them. Which
what's crazy is where I am up here, there's Confederate flags out everywhere.
That shit is bizarre. Yeah.
It's so insane. And it's one of those things where I go, you can ask them, do they understand, do they know what it means? And they will say, well, it's part of our heritage. I'm like, really? How's it feel living in the North, talking with a Southern flag in your yard? Like, run me through your paces. I got time. Like,
But I look at it like, I know who my enemy is, I guess I'd rather know who I'd rather like, oh, you're a fuckhead. Got it. I don't have to like wonder, and their emboldenedness and their like arrogance is one thing, but regardless, if that's what they want to display and they want to fucking fly that flag literally, like, well then there it is.
I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, I feel the biggest lack of society these days is I don't say intelligence, it's common sense. It really is. It's like common sense and it's respect.
Keep listening for more of my conversation with Justin. Visit www.whoischristineanyway.com for access to all the social media links and additional podcast episodes.